anybody that's in my position, whether it be a son or daughter or mother, father or husband, to lose anybody close to you is pain, you know. It's a terrible pain that it's just an ache and you feel it's never going to go away.
Alexander Miller was just 48 when he died of a heart attack last year. He was buried in his local cemetery here at Monklands, near Glasgow. Monklands has the worst record for heart attacks in Scotland, and Scotland tops the World League table for coronary heart disease.
Number 1 at the head. Number 2 at the feet. Number 3. You like it? Lift it.
We have entrusted our brother into the hands of God, and we now commit his body to the ground, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The peace of God, which is beyond our utmost understanding, keep guard over your hearts and thoughts in Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Can you put it into words? It's such a loss. It's unbelievable, the loss it is, you know. It's, you imagine that they're going to come in, you know. Our first few weeks I was setting table for 4 instead of for 3.
The pain doesn't go away. It's like part of you has been severed. Part of the children has been, their life's been severed, and the dad has been taken. How can you tell a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old that God needs their dad more than them?
You hear the people that are getting divorced and they say that's like more than a death. But around the world somewhere, maybe they pass by and they'll say hello to each other. But you know, in this world, you will never see them.
When John died in the December, of course, the first thing you think about was my fault. Was it the food I made him? Was it what I gave him to eat? Was it... Because I know he'd exercised well, he didn't smoke, he drank on social occasions, he didn't even drink in the house. And then you say, oh, maybe it's the food.
Give us a roll, Jackson!
Having a good time today for too many young Scots means sowing the seeds of a bad time later on. The Scots live hard and they play hard. These days they also die hard. Over 20,000 a year from heart attacks. And where unhealthy hearts are concerned, the story of Scotland the Grave actually begins here among the pre-teens. The nation that was created and nurtured on a diet of porridge and herring is now one where pie and chips rule, okay. For thousands, trapped in a cycle of bad diet, boredom and nicotine, Scotland has become a nation of heart attacks just waiting to happen. The most depressing part is that in many places, each new generation simply adopts the bad habits of the one before. And where other countries have seen their heart disease levels tumbling over the past decade, in Scotland, the figures are only now showing the first tentative signs of coming down. Each year, a stadium this size, full of Scots, will be emptied into the graveyards. And it doesn't have to happen.
It was frightening, like a tightness across the chest, and the one arm, it was like a weight. I felt if I could just have taken that arm off and put it down somewhere.
Just a right digging pain. As if someone just putting a knife in you all the time. And it goes right into your arms.
I was at Inverness at the time, and during the night I thought I had what I thought was indigestion. And the next morning I thought I'd better get in touch with the doctor, so I did so. But at the time I didn't think it was a heart attack.
Heart disease in Scotland now kills more people than road accidents and cancer combined. It is the great widowmaker. It leaves children fatherless. It robs industry of key workers and managers alike. Sometimes it's perversely indiscriminate, ignoring those who have all the danger factors and claiming those who have apparently heeded the correct medical advice.
Okay, sounds all right this morning. Good. Okay. Well, that seems to have settled.
A huge volume of research into what causes heart attacks seems to produce as many questions as answers. The only thing the experts agree about is that it's something to do with the way Scots live their lives.
Scotland has had for the last 10 years the worst record in the world for coronary heart disease. It's vied for first place with Northern Ireland, and it varies from year to year which one actually is top. But between the two of us, we are head and shoulders above everywhere else now in the Europe and in the rest of the world. I think probably it's the lifestyle characteristics more important than genetic factors in saying that we are different, the Northern Ireland and Scots, from the rest of the United Kingdom and the rest of Europe. I suspect it's lifestyle that's the key.
This is a Swede, and there's a C in it. It does you as much good as this kind of C, and much more good than this kind. Here it is, vitamin C. There's plenty of sweet in the shops, plenty of ways of cooking them, and plenty of vitamin.
Heart disease has only reached epidemic proportions since the last war. At that time, with each family limited to 2 ounces of butter, 8 ounces of sugar and 4 ounces of bacon or ham a week, coronary heart disease killed 25% fewer Scots than it does now. More people grew and ate their own vegetables, and the exercise of actually working the land did them no harm either. The nation had never been fitter. Sadly, the intervening 45 years have produced an entirely different story.
It's pretty clear that we have a diet which can be described as one of the worst in the world. In fact, it's not at all surprising that we have such a high rate of heart disease, where all you have to do is to look at what the Scots eat, and you can pretty well guarantee that as a nation we're in trouble.
In 1984, the World Health Organization set up a 10-year study to investigate the risk factors in heart disease in 26 countries worldwide. One of these countries was Scotland. The study was largely designed by Professor Hugh Tunstall-Pedo of the University of Dundee. In a survey of 22 districts throughout Scotland, Tunstall-Pedo found that cholesterol levels were up to 20% higher than in the USA. Out of 13,000 Scots examined, many had a remarkably low consumption of fruit and vegetables, and they smoked more.
The risk of death from coronary disease is higher than from any other single cause, and in men the chances of dying of a coronary before retiring age are about 1 in 10 to 1 in 11. So the male population is being decimated by coronary disease. We think that the traditional factors that are important in Scotland are smoking and the effect of diet on serum cholesterol, but we suspect that this is also compounded by low consumption of fruit and vegetables.
The Monklands district of Strathclyde has at its centre the old coal and iron towns of Airdrie and Coatbridge, a sprawling melting pot where immigrant Irish and Presbyterian Scots have had to forge a way of living together. Monklands has a population of just over 100,000. Currently, it also has the worst heart disease record in Scotland. 3 out of 4 people in Monklands live in council houses, more per head of population than anywhere else in Scotland. Male unemployment in the district is around 11%, with 4,000 currently on the dole. But Monklands is far from the most socially deprived part of Scotland, apart, that is, from its smoking levels.
I mean, I grudge paying money to pack of cigarettes, but it's just that I've got linked to it now. So I've got to. I mean, if I want a fag, I've got to go out and buy them.
Usually between 40 and 60 sometimes. Depends. I'm drinking or smoking.
I don't really smoke a lot compared to some people anyway. No, I do not. 15, 20.
Stopped it 7 years ago. I had a wee bit of heart attack myself.
It's just a habit I've got into and I can't get stopped. And that's hard.
I just kind of cut down in eating and lose a bit of weight.
Well, they say smoking is the highest, that causes the highest death rate in the Monklands, smoking. And they advise people better to stop it now than when it's too late.
In Monklands, we're not any different in terms of high blood pressure or cholesterol. We're not different from the Scottish norm, but we are different from the Scottish norm in terms of smoking. There's a lot of smoking goes on, high levels of smoking. People talk about social deprivation, but I think that's a very glib sort of term, and I really don't know how social deprivation operates. It's maybe just another way of saying that a lot of people smoke.
Tunstall Pedo's team at Ninewells Hospital, Dundee, also identified another group particularly at risk through increased smoking. Scotland's chronic heart disease level has been confined largely to men. Now death rates from heart attacks among Scottish women also put them at the top of the international league. The Ninewells team found that more than a third of girls under 15 in Dundee are now heavy smokers.
We have a terrible problem with Scottish women, particularly the younger women, because they're smoking like chimneys. And I think that what the scientists have to actually prove is something that I think will probably turn up, and that is there is no better way of making yourself look old in 10 years' time than smoking 20 cigarettes a day today. I think once we get through to Scottish women that smoking is a wonderful way of withering yourself into oblivion, then in fact perhaps they'll start looking to new ways of enjoying themselves.
Hello, coronary care, staff nurse.
Ironically, many nurses who work in Ninewells Hospital come straight from the coronary care unit with the evidence of what causes heart disease fresh in their minds, and then go off to the special recreation room where nursing smokers are allowed to put a light to their tensions.
Oh, I know the risks and that, but I enjoy smoking. And like that, I'm still young. And with everything else that's going on in the world, the bomb could go off or anything. Could die at anything.
Yeah, I do want to live long, but I just don't think about it just now. Probably if somebody was to say to me, this is what the inside of your lungs look like, then maybe it would make us change our mind, but Doesn't bother us at the moment, no.
So, Scots appear to smoke more than most. And more Scots women smoke and die of heart disease than anywhere else in the world. The Scottish diet, too, is among the worst in the world. But are the risk factors the same for all sections of Scots society? Or is there a particular class element in the high Scottish figures? This is the Eastwood district of Glasgow, only 20 miles from Monklands. But where Monklands is unashamedly working class with high unemployment and social deprivation, this is one of the most prosperous suburbs in Scotland. And where currently Monklands has Scotland's highest coronary rates, Eastwood has the lowest among the 22 districts surveyed. Here in one of Eastwood's exclusive shopping malls, the contrasts in lifestyle with Monklands could not be more acute.
I think it is interesting that the best and the worst are two districts in Scotland that lie almost next door to each other, suggesting that whatever it is that's causing that difference isn't geographical, it's some other factor. And from our previous studies, I think we are quite confident that the main difference is social. About 20 or 30 years ago, it was the higher social classes, the professional, the higher educated groups, in which coronary disease was more common. It was therefore related to stress. It was executive stress, it was executive burnout, it was related to their jobs. However, over the last 20 or 30 years, the pattern of disease, the coronary disease in the different social groups has changed completely around the other way to being much more common in the manual worker, in the unskilled person. And stress doesn't seem somehow to be perceived by those who study it as so important.
The working class in Scotland are really under pressure because they have poor housing. They've got a terrible health record. They feel as though they're oppressed. Their unemployment rate is terrible. And they think, here's another lot of people telling us what to do. And the problem for us is how do we get them to understand that we're not blaming them for all their problems, but actually they've got within their own household the opportunity of jacking themselves up in terms of the sort of food that they choose.
But while Monklands won notoriety as Scotland's heart attack black spot, there are many other districts with even worse social deprivation, especially in the big conurbations of Glasgow, Edinburgh and Dundee. This is Mid Craigie in Dundee, one of the city's older housing schemes. Local unemployment here runs at 20%, the highest in the city. And where food's concerned, the health advice being put out by Tunstall Pedo's team is falling on deaf ears, even in their home base of Dundee.
I think a lot of their attitudes around here about heart disease is that, well, it can't happen to me. You know, just carry on as they're doing until it does happen, if they're on their own doorstep, then they'll start to think, but until then.
The areas that we live in and the money and that we've got, and there's loads of things we'd love to do, but we just can't afford to do it, and we're restricted to what we can and what we can't do.
Most people around here are poor. I mean, they have enough to live on. It makes an existence, but no much else for luxuries.
We have chips quite a lot, actually. I mean, sometimes we have at 10 o'clock at night, I know, from the chip up. But mostly it's the frozen chips, the quick fried chips, or homemade chips, using a lot of fat, just soggy chips.
I tend to go a lot for macaroni and cheese, spaghetti bolognese, sausages, pies, because they're cheap and they're filling.
It's easier, simply for you know, go and put on beef burgers than sit and make a pot of stew or sit and make a pot of soup.
And sometimes we'll have cauliflower. We very rarely have it because we usually put cauliflower with the fish, but we don't eat much fish because even that's expensive. So it's just maybe once every 3 months we'll have a bit of cauliflower with a bit of fish.
I just can't stand vegetables. I hate them, so it's very rarely that I do buy vegetables in my house.
People do live day to day. I mean, they're not going to say, oh, I'm not going to have this because in 20 years' time it's going to give me a heart attack. You know, they just say, well, if it happens, fair enough, I'm going to enjoy it now.
If you're breaking up children in a household where the food is pretty awful, those children after the age of 4 or 5 will actually begin to think that the awful food is really quite normal food. And the problem in Scotland is that almost every household in Scotland has got a diet which requires instant change if one's going to improve it and make it better tasting. And I have been into many households who claim that they can't afford a healthy diet, and they are squandering money on the wrong purchases from the supermarket. We have got to really allow people to learn how to choose simple, cheap, good foods so that they can have a healthy diet without having to spend a fortune. It is possible, but as long as people spend all their money on cigarettes, video recorders, bingo and all the rest of it, which I know they consider to be pleasure, why not have a bit of pleasure in food?
Aberdeen must be one of the least socially deprived cities in the British Isles. Unemployment here is the lowest in Scotland, thanks to the booming oil industry. And the success of the local football team reflects a city brimming with confidence. Aberdeen's heart disease record, too, is among the best in Scotland. But despite claims that working-class Scots are more at risk, disturbing evidence challenging this is emerging with a spate of recent heart attacks among the professional classes in the city. Mike Park is one of Aberdeen's best-known lawyers. As senior partner in one of the biggest local legal firms, he acted for the Occidental Oil Company after 167 of its employees died in the Piper Alpha oil rig tragedy. Shortly after the year-long inquiry into the disaster, Park was struck down by a massive coronary, one of the unrecognised victims of Piper Alpha.
At one time I was coming here regularly at 7 o'clock in the morning, each and every working day. I didn't regard it as any kind of punishment, I didn't regard it as any sort of risk-creating situation. It was just simply that there was work to be done. It was fascinating work, it remains fascinating work. I'm trying to encourage my partners just to stand back for a moment and say, look, we've talked in the past about something must give, and something has given. I have given, and it isn't a matter of somebody leaving the partnership unwell. It could very well be in partnerships up and down the country, people are just simply dying or to be killed by a combination of factors. But as far as lawyers are concerned, I think stress is the greatest problem.
The professional classes may well believe their heart attacks are caused by stress, but coronary experts claim the evidence is simply not there. In any case, nutritionists like Professor Philip James of the Rowett Research Laboratory in Aberdeen point to new research indicating that healthy eating may also play a vital part in helping us cope with stress.
I have 3 messages that are relatively simple messages for a very complicated story. The first is, eat whole grain cereal for breakfast. The second is, eat between 4 and 6 slices of brown or wholemeal bread per day, depending on your size. And the third message is, eat 5 portions of fruit and vegetables per day. If you actually start with that, you then don't have the room and the desire for all these other foods, the chocolates, the sweets, the fatty foods. Start with those 3 messages and you get a long way.
Ever thought what would happen if 2 journalists with completely opposing views were to write on exactly the same paper? Well, now you can find out. Because Julie Birchall and Sir John Junior both write in the Mail on Sunday.
The Ford Transit, Britain's best-selling business van, is now available on finance. Trust Ford to carry it off.
Unchained Melodies, with the very latest recording by the Righteous Brothers. 20 of the greatest rock and roll heartbeats. Benny King. Crazy. Patsy Cline.
I'm crazy for
And the #1 from Bobby Vinton. All these and many more. 20 of the greatest rock and roll heartbeats, unchained melodies, an album for now and always.
To outsiders, the least stressful place in the United Kingdom ought to be the Outer Hebrides. Here, surely, away from the pressure of the cities and surrounded by seas teeming with fish, the local crofters should have one of the healthiest lifestyles in the country, both in terms of diet and the physical demands of the crofting system. Sadly, the reverse is true. The Hebrides were not included in the original 22 districts assessed in Tunstall Peddo's 9-well survey, but a subsequent study has shown now that the risk factor levels for heart disease are even more prevalent here than on the mainland. Male cholesterol, angina and hypertension levels were all higher than the mainland average, and 29% of women who took part in the survey were classed as obese, with only 4% taking any regular exercise. Despite its isolation, the High Street in Stornoway, Isle of Lewis, could be the role model for high streets throughout the rest of Scotland. Out to lunch for thousands of Scots school pupils means a bag of chips on the hoof washed down with a bottle of cola.
This is nice, so you know, I prefer to eat this than to eat healthy.
Oh, but there's no other good food in town. Ah, it's the only food I can get cheap.
I don't see many of you think fish.
Oh, it's too dear. It costs to buy. It costs about $1.25 for those chips. It's about $1.60.
Same with chicken and chips, that's too expensive.
Yeah.
You just buy chips.
So you just got to buy chips. I like the odd apple or sometimes. Chip party's the best.
You'll have an apple when you go home, but you have this in town. Because there's nowhere really can buy health food anyway that serves it ready served. The canteen's packed already, so you come in town and buy this.
Following alarming reports on obesity levels among island women, some are now starting to do something about it.
The women on the island really used to do a lot of work around the crofts and with the sheep and the peat cutting and that sort of thing. And then they now don't do quite so much because of all the modern technology. People don't do as much peat cutting. They don't have as many sheep as they used to have. And their lifestyles have changed. They have a lot more ceilidhs, which is like people going visiting in the evenings. They have tea and cakes and scones and crowdie and cream and all these sort of things. And they're not really doing much exercise. In the summertime, you do see people out walking and cycling a lot more. But in the winter, it is very easy to go home and put a fire on and just sit by it when it's raining and windy outside. You really don't. It's not conducive to exercising at all.
Also, of course, there's been the introduction of the clock. This has been a major disaster. People used to work until they were exhausted and then sleep it off. But now suddenly they start looking at their watches. And so this introduction of timekeeping has probably been not very good for us.
All right. All right.
Among the older generation, hard work and a healthier diet contributed to islanders being among the most long-lived in the country.
My father was 58, and I had an uncle that was 95. Oh, hard work never killed anybody.
My mother was up at 6 o'clock making my porridge, and I had to eat a plate of porridge and a boiled egg in order. I wasn't allowed out without that because we didn't get home till 6 o'clock in the evening.
Part of the traditional diet was fish, and Lewis is still the centre of the island's fishing industry. But here too, fashions in eating have changed.
I never eat shellfish. I never liked shellfish.
I just never liked fish. My mother never gave it to me much.
Well, even when I try to lose weight, I still don't eat fish.
Anything but fish.
Things are basically for convenience. Fish is a lot of handling, gutting and cleaning, and I think this tends to put quite a lot of people off. But, they want something they can put in a pan and end the story. Our own products are in great demand. We are producing roughly about 5 tons of processed scampi a week, which finds a home on the UK mainland. It seems to sell very well, so obviously there is some people out there who like scampi products.
Fish farming is one of the new boom industries for the islands. But again, little of the salmon produced here is actually eaten in the Hebrides.
We sell salmon here on the pier if somebody wishes to buy for £1.20, which is cheaper than sausages or hamburgers or fish fingers. But young housewives don't wish to handle anything as complicated as an ungutted fish. So naturally, children have grown up not knowing how to tackle it. So it's all part of the problem. It's a UK problem as much as a local one, because they just don't eat enough fish in UK.
It all comes back to education. Why do the Scots eat things they know are bad for them? Why has a whole industry grown up around junk food in Scotland when natural produce is so much healthier? Is there something in the genes of the northern races that makes them more prone to heart attacks? In the frozen north, one country has proved in a national crusade that it is possible to defeat heart disease. Finland shares all of Scotland's chronic weather conditions and many of its bad eating habits. 20 years ago, its heart disease record was even worse than Scotland's is now, the highest in the world. But about that time, the Finns recognized that they had a problem and decided to do something about it. Since then, Finland's record in slashing heart attacks by up to 40% in some areas has become the envy of the world.
In January 1971, the representatives of the North Karelian population, they signed a very strong petition which a delegation took to Helsinki, even to the Prime Minister and many other offices, asking for urgent help. Please do something to reduce heart disease in North Karelia. The information that we had indicated that there were extremely high cholesterol levels in people's blood because of very fatty diet, and there was a lot of smoking among men. And so the main strategy for us was really to start a systematic, intensive program to change these unhealthy lifestyles.
This is North Karelia, on the Russian-Finnish border. It's a land of farming and forestry where a tough peasant people have eked out a living for centuries, usually under the shadow of the Russian bear and often under a heavy blanket of snow. But as the harsh lifestyle changed after the war, the local diet, heavy in fats and meat for energy, hardly changed at all. When heart attacks began to soar, the North Karelians decided to fight back.
We have constantly told the people here, we cannot prevent heart disease. It's up to you to change your lifestyles. We can only show you the way.
In a mass media campaign, smoking became the first target. Saturation TV coverage led the blitz against nicotine. The next target was manufactured dairy products. Finns learned for the first time about the perils of butter and cheese. Government intervention was enlisted to produce leaner meat in Finland's beef cattle. And where vegetables had previously been poor in quality and availability, now they were plentiful. From newspapers and TV advertising, the North Karelians learned about the miraculous qualities of fresh fruit. And local teenagers were taught in school how to restyle their eating habits by learning new cooking habits, with health as the vital new ingredient. The North Karelians recognized from the beginning that the key target group were young people. And from the kindergarten upwards, the healthy eating message was hammered home. The campaign also recognized the importance of the workplace in getting the message across to adults. Heart health checkups were arranged at all major employers.
Gradually, with this overall work, people have picked up the message. That means the consumers are more and more asking for cholesterol-lowering, low-fat, healthier foods. And with that, the industry, which is always competing, they are now picking more and more this as an argument for selling and marketing. And now, over these years, I think the food industry has come very much along with us, so that they are now trying to make their business with selling healthier products, which of course we are happy with.
And as the campaign caught the public imagination, industry too responded to the new dictates of the marketplace. The local bakery at Joensuu agreed to reduce the salt and fat content of its bread and pastries.
Ehkä se on kaikista oleellisin tämä rasvojen muutos. Siis voin käyttö on pudonnut nyt viimeisenä 2 vuonna meillä vajaaseen 1/3 siitä, mitä käytettiin ennen. Ja tämä on korvattu kasvirasvapohjaisella margariinilla tai vielä lisäksi aika suurelta osalta rypsiöljyllä. Me osataan kyllä aika hyvin katsoa eteenpäin ja kiitos muun muassa Pohjois-Karjalan projektin, niin me tiedetään tämä suuntaus, mihinkä ollaan menossa. Ja täytyy myöntää, että hivenen me yllätyttiin siinä, että kun me korvattiin näillä kevyimmillä rasvoilla, niin niiden maku ei ainakaan huonontunut, päinvastoin monessa tapauksessa maku ja rakenne jopa parani.
After being bombarded by TV anti-smoking messages, Kari Nissanen was just one who finally plucked up the courage to throw away the weed for good.
No, kyllä oli kimmokkeita sellaisia 30 vuotta polttaneena, niin siinä tuntuu, että on paikat tukossa jo pelkästään tupakan savusta. Ja sitten oli harkinnassa, jotta mä lopettaisin ihan noin vaan. Ja sitten tämä meidän työterveyshoitaja niin sai ympäri puuttua tällaiseen TV-projektiin sitten mukaan. Ja tämä sitten loppukimokkeen antoi tämän.
These risk factor levels started to change after the beginning of intervention very soon. A lot of men stopped smoking, and practically every second man who smoked then has permanently stopped. Diets have changed a lot. Cholesterol levels, blood pressure levels have reduced, and associated with that has been a consistent drop in heart disease rates.
What worked for North Karelia has now been adopted throughout Finland. Over the 20 years since the project started, coronary heart deaths in North Karelia have dropped by almost 40%. In Finland generally, it's half this level, so clearly there is still room for improvement. But even so, Finland has now dropped back to 4th place in the World Heart Attack League. Today, a whole generation of young Finns face a healthier, livelier and longer future, because one local community decided it had had enough. And it's with the young that Finland's hopes of a permanent solution to its heart disease epidemic ultimately lie.
Oh, this is terrible. There was a wild party over in Pleasant Town last night. And people smeared butter all over their bodies.
Butter? Did you say butter? They should have used margarine. It's better for your heart.
Oh!
Use margarine. Choose one with a liquid oil as its first ingredient. It's best for your heart.
Regular exercise like this is great for staying in shape, but it's not for everyone. I'm Dr. John Farquhar of the Stanford Heart Disease Prevention Program. There's a more common exercise that we can all do, which is great for staying fit. It can be done anywhere, almost any time, and it's easy.
In the United States, heart disease is still the #1 killer, cancer being second. But the gap between cancer and heart disease has narrowed because the rate of heart disease has fallen by some 27% since its peak in 1967. So we feel we've come a long way to reduce the unnecessary burden of premature death and disability due to heart attack and stroke as well.
Stanford University, California, just about as far as you can get from Finland or the Outer Hebrides. But the serenity of this university campus belies the relentless 20-year battle that's been waged by Dr. John Farquhar and his team members of the Stanford Heart Disease Prevention Program to reduce coronaries on the west coast of America. By targeting specific communities in the San Francisco Bay Area and using many of the mass media techniques that work to such good effect in North Karelia, Farquhar's team has led the USA into a more healthy lifestyle with a corresponding dramatic drop in the number of heart attacks.
Yeah. What do you want? What really is fattening is the butter, sour cream, and gravy that you have with a potato or pasta. If you really want to lose weight and keep it off, eat fresh fruits and vegetables, chicken and fish, and don't forget the starches.
Tonight, our news director, Dan Cullen, begins a News Focus 46 along with the Stanford Heart Disease Prevention Program. It's to help you keep trim for life.
What are your chances of having a heart attack before the age of 65? Here's your hamburger, all dressed up the way you like it. But all the garnishes in the world won't change one fact. The average hamburger is 1/4 fat. Fat that hardens in your arteries and leads to heart attacks. Adding cheese may double the calories, double the amount of animal fat. One trick to healthy eating: don't add cheese.
We were there able to show that if you marshal all the forces in a community, including television, radio, newspapers, service clubs, giving classes in the basements of churches on the weekends, reaching people in their homes with material mailed to them that explain in a clear fashion what the problem is, encouraging people to have their blood pressures measured and their cholesterol measured. So all of that worked very nicely, and we achieved somewhere around a 25 to a 30% reduction in the estimated risk of heart attack.
Good morning from 1380.
Smoking and exercise were other key targets.
And again this year, here at KTOM, we're participating with the Stanford Heart Disease Prevention Program and their Stop Smoking Cool Turkey program.
We all know the main ingredient of this package is tobacco. But what happens to that tobacco when it burns? These are just some of the byproducts of cigarette smoke. Methylene chloride, acetone, formaldehyde, lead, and arsenic. 30 million Americans have quit smoking. You can do it.
We see, particularly in California, I think that cigarette smoking is not socially acceptable anymore. And that entire change has been based on information, starting with the Surgeon General's report 25 years ago.
Here's a healthy living message from this station and the Stanford Heart Disease Prevention Program.
Charlie, come on, you promised.
Did not. Promised what?
That we would start exercising again.
Oh, that. I lied.
Remember, this was your idea.
It was not.
I feel so out of shape, you said. When we used to exercise, I used to feel so strong, so virile, so masculine.
You misunderstood me. I said you felt so strong, so virile, so masculine.
Sorry, dear. We could start exercising in the morning, you said. We could start out slow and easy, you said. And before long, you said, we'll be back in shape again.
I said that?
Last night.
I find that the data from Scotland, saying that Scotland is the leading country in coronary rate, it hits me in my heart because I'm of Scottish background and I have relatives there. And so I think about the country. I think I've heard from people that some of the resistance in Scotland comes from the idea that perhaps it's a genetic issue, that Scots and Celtic peoples are just very high risk, and so therefore we can't do anything about it. That's absolutely and totally wrong. I think it's, to think that way means that you're willing to abdicate any hope for the future. It's scientifically incorrect, totally, it's hogwash.
So if Scots are not preordained to have more heart attacks than others, Why has there been no campaign like those in Finland and California aimed at reducing the disease? Both England and Wales, with better records than Scotland, have introduced specific heart campaigns. Only now is the Scottish Home and Health Department mounting a similar campaign north of the border. And already there have been complaints that what's on offer is too little, too late. Perhaps significantly, the Scottish minister responsible for health has no departmental responsibility over what Scots actually eat.
I have no ministerial responsibility for agriculture or food, and there has been no great lobby presented to me arguing for that case. I think most people recognise that the key thing is persuading people to change their lifestyle in a very dramatic way in some cases in order to enhance the quality of their life and indeed their life expectancy.
While the community-based mass media techniques used in Finland cut deaths from heart disease by up to 40%, the Scottish campaign has set the more modest target of a 25% reduction over 10 years. Some think the minister has fixed his sights too low.
If I'd felt that the target was low, I wouldn't have set it at the level that we did. And we have to set targets based on the professional advice which has come to us from the Chief Medical Officer and others. And the advice is that that is an ambitious target, and we plan to meet it.
Leading heart experts in Scotland believe the proposed campaign goes nowhere near far enough. The only way to achieve radical improvements, they argue, is by targeting risk groups at community levels, as they did in Finland and California.
It's only going to work if the community says, I'm fed up of my uncle, my aunt, my father and my grandmother dying so early in life. We've got to do something about this. And once we get community action, which is not based on the medics working on something, when the community decides that Aberdeen or Glasgow is going to get a better health record than Edinburgh or the Northern Isles, then I think with local community work, we're going to start seeing the changes, which at the moment are happening so painfully slowly. I reckon that in the next century, Scotland, at the present rate of progress, is going to have as bad a record as ever it had.
Others go even further and call for a nutrition policy as well as direct government intervention on food prices, especially fruit and vegetables, to encourage a more healthy diet.
I think we need to start with a nutrition policy, a national nutrition policy, where supermarkets know what kind of foods they should be supplying, where people responsible for providing canteen meals for factories, providing school meals, all know the kind of diets that we should be providing.
What we're saying is that instead of the producers determining which foods are priced at which levels, there should be a consideration of the consumer interest and the consumer health interest. And we should be encouraging, for example, fresh fruit and vegetables and their transportation to the less accessible northern parts of Europe on health grounds, and not just to help producers.
At some levels, and especially among those who have already had a warning, the health message is at last being taken to heart, literally. The people of Dundee aren't aware of it yet, but their famous pies have actually undergone a subtle change.
I started to pay more attention to diet when I discovered I had a cholesterol problem. So I decided we would try to produce a traditional Scottish pie, but using healthier, modern ingredients. We did this by using fats which contain high levels of polyunsaturates and using leaner beef. We haven't told the public of this so far because the public in Dundee is so traditional that if you tell them you've made changes, they tend to blame this for a drop in quality or whatever.
But there is still a depressing fatalism about many Scots when it comes to changing the habits of a lifetime.
I didn't do much exercise. The most exercise is probably walking around the pool table once a week and playing a game at snooker.
I just enjoy myself to full. If I enjoy smoking, I'll smoke. If I enjoy drinking, I'll drink.
I don't think I would ever really stop smoking altogether. Never.
My dad died when he was 49, just 5 days after his birthday, a stroke and a cerebral hemorrhage. He was quite young when he died. And I suppose me and my kids and that, we are in a high-risk area with that happening to my dad. I'm just not sure which way to prevent it for my kids, but I know I'm going to have to do something.
And so it's hard getting the message through to a lot of people. Again, it comes back to their attitudes. It won't happen to me.
If Scotland is ever to match the dramatic drop in heart deaths other countries are experiencing, many believe the nation's first task is to capture the hearts and minds of the young.
I frankly think we're going to have to start with the children because they're flexible. You can actually get them to start brainwashing their parents, if you like. In Finland, nothing happened until you taught the children that the best thing they could do is to go home and stop the parents smoking, start them trying different diets, teaching their parents, God help us, to actually learn how to cook. Then, in fact, we may begin to make some progress.
At Bells Hill Maternity Hospital, which serves the Monklands district of Strathclyde, young Stephen Ralston weighs in.
3 kilos, 300 grams. Are you going to see your mummy, Stephen? Eh? Your young Mandy? Number one son.
A new baby boy, blissfully unaware that he has been born into the world's most high-risk place for coronary heart disease. Right now, Stephen's chances of living to a ripe old age are as good as any other baby boy's. But it's how well little Stephen and thousands of other young Scots born in the 1990s absorbed the lessons of healthy eating with regular exercise and abstinence from smoking that will determine whether 50 years from now, Scotland the brave will still be Scotland the grave.
The Channel 4 booklet accompanying this series costs £2.50. Send a cheque or postal order payable to Channel 4 to Affairs of the Heart, P.O. Box 4000, London W3 6XJ or Glasgow G12 9JQ. And if you'd like to talk in confidence about
to charge customers extra